Hello, welcome again to Beyond the Bottom Line. Today, my colleague Paul Roth and I will be interviewing Jesse Eisinter, who's just written a new book, The Chickenshit Club. I'm going to leave it to Paul to introduce Jesse.
Hi, Jesse.
Hi, how are you?
And welcome to the program.
Thank you.
You graduated from Columbia and went into journalism, covered finance for the Wall Street Journal, and then started writing, covering the financial crisis. And it was the financial crisis, if I recall correctly, that led you, and your concern about the manner in which the justice system was operating in the financial crisis, to lead you to write this book,
Yes.
The Chickenshit Club. Okay, how did you come by the title of the book?
Well, there's a guy named Jim Comey.
I've heard of him.
Yes. So viewers may know him from recent escapades as being fired by Donald Trump as FBI director, but in 2002 he became the U.S. Attorney in the Southern District of New York. And the Southern District, viewers have to understand, you guys know this well, but it's the premier office of the Department of Justice, and it focuses on corporate law enforcement, especially securities fraud. And the SDNY attorneys think of themselves as the best of the best of the best. You know, you just have to ask them; they'll assure you we're the best trial lawyers in the country. So he gathers them all together.
My daughter and son-in-law worked in that office, and I've been so assured.
Yes, exactly. Well, in that case, they're right, but there are other offices that are good. And so he gathers them, including your son-in-law, because your son-in-law Ben Lawsky attended this speech, and he says, "Well, I want to talk to you a little bit about your jobs." And he says, "Before I start, how many of you have never lost a case?" And these guys have gone to the best law schools, best clerkships, bunch of hands shoot up because they're so proud of their undefeated records. And he says, "Well, me and my buddies have a name for you guys. You're the Chickenshit Club." And hands go down, and these guys, are feeling very sheepish, what's going on? And what Comey goes on to explain is your job is not about winning, especially about winning at all costs. Your job is not to accumulate an undefeated record. Your job is about doing justice. And justice requires taking on the most important, most significant wrongdoers in society, taking on ambitious cases, and sometimes you can do justice even if you lose. And the argument of the book is that the Justice Department has become the Chickenshit Club writ large because it does not take on the most powerful wrongdoers in society. In fact, I argue that they've lost the will and ability to prosecute top corporate executives, and it's not just about the financial crisis. It was building before that, and it persists to today, and it's not just about big banks, but big executives from tech and pharmaceutical and industrial companies.
Well, what happened? Because if you go back to past crises, if you go back to the savings and loan crisis, if you go back to the junk bond crisis, if you deal with the cooking of the books problems of the early 2000s when you had WorldCom and Enron and Adelphia and Tyco, those cases, senior executives were all charged and sent to prison. What changed the dynamic so that what concerns you so much is no senior banking executives went to prison after the financial crisis?
Right.
What happened?
Well, there was a big change, and so I'm not nostalgic, or look at the past through rose-colored glasses, because there's never been a golden age where we did this perfectly. But there were silver ages, and as you just mentioned, and after the NASDAQ bubble burst, we had a pandemic of corporate accounting fraud, and most of the top executives from most of the big companies involved were prosecuted. And what I argue is that was the apex, but then the beginning of the backlash, and that there was a corporate lobbying and white-collar defense bar backlash against those prosecutions that successfully depicted them as overly aggressive, that they were cowboy prosecutors. Essentially what happened was there were fiascos at the DOJ, They lost some cases. They faced this lobbying backlash from corporations that really succeeded in rolling back their powers, both from a policy point of view and in the courts. And the DOJ has not responded to that. And in doing so, they lost tools, prosecutorial tools, and lost skill set, and changed their focus entirely, and we'll get into this in a second, away from prosecuting individuals and towards settling with corporations for money.
How much of this do you think had to do with the demise of Arthur Andersen
A huge
after the
amount.
Enron case? And you might describe what happened to Arthur.
Yes, so Arthur Andersen was the accounting fraud for Enron, and really that understates things because I believe they were the handmaiden to Enron's fraud. And
I should point out that they were one of the big five in those years.
yeah, it was one of the, exactly, one of the biggest accounting
And
firms.
it was sort of the premier of the accounting firm.
It certainly had the best reputation.
Yes.
What happened with Enron is that as regulators started investigating, Arthur Andersen destroyed literally tons and tons of documents related to the audit of Enron and were eventually prosecuted for
Did that
obstruction
all
of
take
justice.
place in the Houston office?
It didn't. It was worldwide. That's one of the myths of Arthur Andersen is that there were limited document destruction. In fact, it took place across the globe and was directed essentially from high-level officials. There's a very famous email that went out from a top-ranking Andersen lawyer that said, "I just want to remind you of our document retention policies." And everybody understood what that meant.
Things like that have happened in other cases.
Yes.
And that took place right after the Enron case was developed?
It took place after they heard about the subpoenas to Enron, SEC subpoenas to Enron. So they had not been subpoenaed themselves, but they understood that they were coming, and and then this lawyer said, "I'd like to send this reminder." Everybody understood what that meant, and they engaged in more document destruction in a period of days that they did all year on a routine basis. So there was nothing routine about this. This was nothing. This was not a kind of common policy. The Department of Justice, I believe, correctly viewed this as obstruction of justice. And not only that, but Arthur Andersen was under a consent decree for the biggest accounting fraud up to that time at Waste Management.
Yeah.
They had also helped not Global Crossing, helped Boston Chicken, helped the largest nonprofit accounting fraud at the time, several others.
They were in WorldCom too, weren't they?
And then right after the trial, so the short story is the Department of Justice tries to settle and they will not admit wrongdoing. And in fact, they say, we're not afraid of the SEC, that's just a cost of doing business, but we can't admit any wrongdoing. And this so infuriates the DOJ, and also they felt boxed into a corner that they were given no choice. They have to take them to trial. They win at trial.
Does admitting wrongdoing for a big five accounting firm amount to going out of business?
Well, my argument is that Arthur Andersen is going out of business anyway after Enron, not only because of Enron, but as you just alluded to, the actually largest accounting fraud happens is revealed a few weeks after they lose a trial, WorldCom. And who is WorldCom's auditor but Arthur Andersen? Arthur Andersen is a partnership. It's facing over 100 lawsuits from aggrieved clients and from shareholders of these companies, and they are unwinding anyway. But the wrongdoing, I think, might have been survivable had they not had this other pattern of abuse. But it was a rotten corporation and a rotten culture, and I think needed to be addressed head on. And the argument, of course, is whether you should ever prosecute a large company. What happens is the defense bar and the lobbying effort argue that this has been a excess prosecution. It's been wrong, and that they have thrown tens of thousands of innocent employees out of jobs, that there were the collateral consequences that they shouldn't have. They changed the conversation entirely away from accounting fraud and to the innocent employees. And it's so successful that it is internalized that this was a mistake by not just Republicans, not just defense lawyers, but by Democratic prosecutors at the DOJ. So people like Mary Jo White, and who heads up Obama's SEC, or Lanny Brewer, who heads up the criminal division of the DOJ under Obama, they both think Anderson was a disastrous mistake.
So does this get to too big to jail?
Yes, it does get to be too big to jail, which is that they start to believe that collateral consequences, which mean two things: one, throwing innocent employees out of jobs; two, that if you prosecute a interconnected company, particularly a bank, that it will cause capital markets disruptions, that hinders your ability to prosecute a company. Their response is to start to settle with corporations. Instead of, in my view, the response should be focusing on individual culpability. So what happens is we completely change the way we enforce corporate laws in this country. Instead of prosecuting individuals, instead of prosecuting companies, and individual prosecutions are at a 20-year low, down 40%. Prosecutions of companies are down 30% at a 20-year low. And instead, we settle with corporations for money. Since 2002, we've done 420 forms of settlement. They're called deferred prosecution agreements, non-prosecution agreements. I call them settlements. In the decade before that, they'd done 18. So this is the preferred way we prosecute. We enforce corporate laws in America.
But that's in reaction to the notion that too big to jail, isn't it?
It is, although it also is part of my argument is that it's a decline in the skill set and will to prosecute individuals.
Well, I'm not sure I agree with you
Yeah.
on that, but I mean, I will say that as a defense attorney representing clients before a regulatory agency, it was always understood, although never discussed, that we would be willing to pay a higher fine for no individuals being charged. And it was always understood that one of our jobs was to make sure that no individuals were charged.
Yeah, I think that's an extraordinary revelation from someone of your stature. And
He
I
hasn't
think
got that much stuff.
he does to me. But I think that's very important because the regulators' jobs and the prosecutors' jobs are to hold individuals accountable, ultimately. This was the foundation of our law enforcement approach throughout the 1960s, 70s, through the 1980s, and really almost through to the 2000s. They wanted to focus on individuals. And this is important because it both deters corporate crime much better than a settlement, and also it is fundamentally legitimizing of our justice system, that we need to hold powerful people accountable. We, in this country, disproportionately punish, as people know, we have a mass incarceration problem. We disproportionately punish the poor, often people of color. This is the flip side, which is that we give a certain class of powerful, wealthy people impunity, and that fundamentally erodes the rule of law and, I believe, threatens our democracy.
Well, most prosecutors, or most defense lawyers that I've talked to who've been former prosecutors say, I don't think he's right on that. We make our careers by going after the most powerful people we can go after. That's one of the things that we look for, we salivate for as prosecutors. The difficulty is in the financial cases, as contrasted to, let's say, the cooking the books cases, it's way down. The activities that happen are way down in the corporation. Cooking the books happens in the executive suites. And so we can find the evidence there even if we don't have documentary evidence. Whereas it's harder in the banking industry to do that. These corporations are so large and the defense mechanisms are there. I mean, one of the problems is, for example, you point out in your book, AIG. Well, AIG was the most complex corporate structure that ever existed in the world.
Yeah.
I mean, how do you bring a case in AIG unless you get documentary evidence?
Right. So there's no question that these cases are very difficult. What I think is that they don't have the skill set to investigate them properly, to figure out who the highest level individual executive was who was culpable. And what you need to do with that is develop the evidence by flipping lower level people. And they don't do that anymore. Every prosecutor knows that this is the way you make a white collar case. Eventually you need someone on the stand to say, I did something wrong and I did it with that person sitting there. And so they all know that, but it takes an enormous amount of time and effort, and there's a lot of risk that you might lose at trial, which could be career altering. And so the incentive structure is really to settle with corporations rather than take these high-risk cases. I think there were cases to be made against top executives, CEOs, CFOs for lying to the public. The way they got Ken Lay at Enron, the founder and chairman and CEO of Enron, was not for knowing and manipulating the books about the off-balance sheet vehicles, the famous debt vehicles that hid Enron's debt. They got him for simple things, for saying one thing privately and another thing publicly, contradicting himself, lying to the public. And there were CEOs who misled the banks and the public about the state of their business in the wake of the financial crisis and in the lead up to the financial crisis. Those were cases, I think, that could have been made with diligent investigative efforts. The problem is they didn't put the resources to it. And if you don't put the resources to it, you don't develop those cases. If you don't look, you won't find.
Let me go to resources for a minute. There's been a trend toward diminishing resources in governmental agencies. I think about the prosecutor at the SEC or the Justice Department somewhere saying to himself or herself, if I settle this case, I can get as we saw in the Goldman Sachs case, a $550 million settlement. It takes me 5 minutes, I write it up, the settlement's done, and the cash comes in. If I have to prosecute this case, it's going to take 5 years, 52 people, and I don't have the resources to do this because government hasn't funded me properly.
So I think you're almost entirely right that the incentive structures to do the settlements, that they both appear to be very punishing of corporations. They also accrue career glory, that internally they're incentivized to do that. I don't think it's really a resource question. I think it's much more a question of priorities and discretion, prosecutorial discretion, because they choose to prosecute certain kinds of cases and they don't choose to prosecute others. In the Southern District, under Preet Bharara, there was a choice to prosecute insider trading companies, insider trading allegations, and mostly at hedge fund managers. Right. This was a relatively safe decision by Bharara, who, after all, was heading up the Southern District when the financial crisis hit in his own backyard. And instead, he's off on a tangent, on a non sequitur, focusing on hedge fund managers and insider trading, which I consider to be a pretty low-level securities fraud crime, not something that opens up systemic problems in our society.
But he did get individuals.
He got safe individuals. Raj Rajaratnam was running a hedge fund with relatively few investors and had no political power in this country. And so that was something that he could take on that had no collateral consequences, and there weren't a vast array of political.
And it was easy. He had wiretaps.
And he had wiretaps. It was much easier, and juries are much more able to understand charges of insider trading. They understand these cases, so they gravitate to them. One thing they can do is insider trading cases. I talked to a prosecutor in the Southern District who said, on the one hand, I had the wiretap, so I was in the room with these guys committing crimes, and it was so exciting. On the other side of my desk, I had 300 pages of a prospectus for a collateralized debt obligation, and I had to weed through that to find out whether there was a crime committed at all. I sympathize with those people, and that's why I really try to model the behavior by saying the prosecutor should prosecute to the top. I locate the blame at the top echelons, that they should provide, that Preet Bharara, Lanny Brewer, Eric Holder, and the current DOJ leadership, they should provide the incentive structure to go after individuals.
I think part of what's been bothering a lot of people is not only that corporations have settled, and they paid very, very large fines to settle in many of these cases, but they were permitted to settle without admitting or denying
Yes.
the activities that went on. What's your view of not admitting or denying?
I think it's a broken system, and I think it's a abrogation of the prosecutorial and regulatory duty to identify what's gone wrong here. The prosecutor's job is not to insulate the wrongdoing corporation from the civil consequences of their wrongdoing. Their job is to identify the truth.
But they're not doing that. I mean, what they're doing is, in order to get the corporation to a situation where the size of the fine, in a sense, may acknowledge the fact that something went wrong, and the agreement to put a monitor in to correct what's not admitted that went wrong,
Yes.
sends the message that something probably did go wrong, and they're trying to change the culture.
Yes, and I think this is a wrong-headed goal, and it doesn't work. So I think that the fines have two sides. They're criticized from both the left and the right, and I think they're legitimate aspects to both. The left argues the corporations are paying a check, nobody's going to prison, and they're just writing a check to get off. And I think there's legitimacy to that. The right says often the
That
government
almost sounds like legal bribery.
I wouldn't necessarily say it's bribery. It's a form of skirting any culpability. Right, and I don't think the fines actually they're high in absolute amounts, but they're not high relative to the corporate profits. And they're paid for by shareholders. We know this is not an effective regime because we see recidivist corporations. We see corporations like JP Morgan or BP or Pfizer enter into multiple settlements, look at Wells Fargo, and yet their bad behavior continues. The right says, with some legitimacy, the government is extorting these companies. The companies have to come to the table. They have no choice. And when the government asks for a figure, they have no choice but to sign. I think there's some legitimacy to that, too, because the public just can't see the allegations. The allegations are not laid out very fulsomely. The companies themselves are actually their law firms, as you guys know, negotiate these settlements, negotiate the language very carefully. And so I don't think this is an adequate regime. The other thing that I assume we're going to talk about is that there's an enormous revolving door problem and outsourcing problem, that the dirty little secret of the way we enforce corporate law enforcement in America today is that we've outsourced and privatized it. And we've outsourced and privatized it to the companies themselves. It's akin to wondering whether Donald Trump has colluded with the Russians in the 2016 campaign and asking him to investigate himself, and he hires Rudy Giuliani to investigate the problem.
But if you're being alleged to have committed a crime, it's relatively standard practice to hire your lawyers to find out what went on.
Yes, of course, it's a completely entirely legitimate exercise for the
if
corporations.
And if the government wants to prove its case, it should use its fact-finding.
Exactly. So what I'm critical of is the government is overly dependent on these internal investigations for its fact-finding. They essentially
That goes back to Larry's point about resources, isn't it?
Well, it's also about discretion. They want to have 10 FCPA, foreign corrupt practices violations in a certain period, rather than focusing on the one that if you got the highest level executives at a big corporation, that would send a deterrent message over more than 10, 20 or 30 companies. So I think it's a discretion issue, but yet I do agree that there should be more resources toward white-collar prosecutions. White-collar prosecutions are now roughly roughly a tenth of all prosecutions, and that sort of overstates things. In the 1990s, they were a fifth.
I don't want to leave the subject without you at least describing what the revolving door is.
Sure. So my concern with the Department of Justice today, is that by and large, criminal corporate law prosecutors are mostly young elites. And They are very bright people, very capable people. But the most important thing to understand about them is that they are future corporate defense law firm partners. And so today the DOJ is a training ground for corporate defense partners. And that's a broken system because it gives them the wrong incentives. The incentives are not actually to be tough beyond all measure. The incentives are to be tough and smart and not be unreasonable when they're coming to a settlement with a corporation because they're auditioning for the next job.
Well, I think we could go on for a long time. You have some very, very fascinating perspectives on this. And I want to thank you, Jesse, for joining us with respect to this. I've enjoyed it. I hope that our TV audience has enjoyed it. And Larry and I thank you for watching and hope that you'll tune in for the next edition of Beyond the Bottom Line. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.